Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and we continue with a bit more Adeptus Titanicus in this video, and what I'm going to be showing you is an unbox, build and magnetizing guide of the Warhound Titan for that particular game system. Mostly it's a pretty simple build and a fairly simple magnetization process. Unfortunately, compared to like the Warlord Titan, it's not quite there and you have to do a little bit of cut and fudge, a little bit of green stuff, a little bit of super glue, but it's not too difficult. In fact, it's a very similar technique on just on a smaller scale than I did for the 28mm version from Forge World. There's a couple of little gotchas within the build itself. Certainly if you're looking to build purely Imperial versions rather than Chaos versions, but we'll cover that when we go through the process. But let's get straight into the video. So here it is then, guys. This is the Adeptus Titanicus Warhound Scout Titans. Now you get two in a box, which isn't too bad, I guess. So you can have two on whichever side you're going to do, or you can split this across. If you've bought the bigger box set, for example, and you've got enough forces to make an entire game out of it, so you can have even forces on both sides. So it's still in its shrink wrap. Let's get that off and let's take a look at the sprues. The artwork on the outside, you know, it's pretty standard. The Adeptus Titanicus box art is actually pretty sweet. It's not sort of models and photographs, or actually it could even be that, to be honest. I mean, looking at the digital artwork that GW and Forge World produce, they do actually photograph the real models that have been painted up and then give it a real good dose through, I believe it's Photoshop and maybe a little bit of After Effects, that kind of stuff, and really jazz up the kits that they build. So a lot of the artwork in all of the Forge World books, for example, is real models, and then they add all the rain effects and lighting and weather effects and everything else on top. Anyway, enough waffle. Let's look at what we're really here for. So inside the box, then we have a Warhound Scout Titan instruction booklet. You know, pretty standard these days. There's no rules or anything attached to that like you do in 40k kits these days. We get a transfer sheet, which is the same as, it's the slightly larger version than we got with the Knight kit. Then we get 3 frames. Now you get 3 frames in here, one of which is all the weapons, and you get 2 of every weapon, which is a pretty good deal. But because you get 2 of every weapon, but you only get 4 little upper arm nodules, that's where we're going to have to get onto the magnetizing. So we do get the Vulcan Mega Bolters, we get the Inferno Super Heavy Flamer thing. What's it called? The Inferno guns. We get turbo laser destructors, and then we get plasma blast guns. We get 2 of each. Now, as I haven't actually played the game yet or even read the rulebook, I'm not sure whether you have to run those in pairs or whether you can run them in whichever combination you like. I think you can run them in any combination. Just thinking back to when I did the unboxing of the Master Kit, with the way that the vehicle cards are all laid out. But I'm not too sure. This isn't about the rules. This isn't about that kind of thing. This is purely about the build and the magnetizing. We also then get a frame of all the legs and all the torso compartments, and then we get pretty much all of the armor panels on the other bit. Now I'm not going to strip all those sprues down and build this as we go. I'm going to go kind of in sections here. So the first thing we've done, there's 3 components on each. I'm going to be building them in a pair. So that's all sort of the hip sections. We then get the top torso, and we then get the legs. Now there are 2 different types of feet, and you have to use 1 of each type on each of the legs. So you get a flat foot, and then you get a raised foot, so they look like they're striding forwards. Just make sure you do that the right way round. We get 4 legs in slightly different poses, and you can mix and match how they go together from what I could tell. And then we get the torso sections, and they just sit on like that. Now I am going to glue those on. There's no reason not to. These are very small. You haven't got to worry about transport of these. They're kind of like the size. They're smaller than 40k Imperial Guard Sentinels. They're not that big really. But once we've got those together, I've built the heads next. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts to the head. There's a bit underneath, 2 sides, a top, and then sort of the teeth section. But bear in mind, when you're building these, you can build a Chaos or an Imperial version. So a traitor force or a loyal force, and there's different plates to do with each type. So you get more sort of Imperial iconography on one, and then you get more spiky trim on the Chaos version. Now I just wanted to pause the video here and discuss those different armour panel options. So the two top carapaces, you get 4 of those, so you can have 2 different Chaos versions and 2 Imperial versions. The same with the shin pads, the same with the top weapon options as well. There's little circle discs there, you get an eye or a Imperial Eagle. You get 2 different groin guards as well, but the top upper thigh guards, you only get 2 of each, which basically means you have to use Chaos pads if you only bought 1 box set to do the other one. If you're going to make 2 Imperial ones, you're going to struggle, and vice versa. 2 Chaos ones, you're going to end up with 2 Imperial plates. There's not a huge difference in them, but if you're really a purist, I think that's an accident or a mistake in the kit. So just be aware of that when you're building your own. I've actually got 2 kits of this, so I can have 2 on each side, which meant I've borrowed 2 plates from the other kit to complete mine here. Now, as you can see on the screen, we only get 4 of these little nubs for the weapons. Now, if you want to mix and match these weapons, then we're going to have to be a bit careful with the way we do this, because unless you just glue them all in place, you're going to be stuck with those weapon sets. I want to be able to mix and match those weapons in game and make some variety out of it. And I'm sure people that are watching this video are probably here for exactly the same reason. So I'm going to use 2 different types of magnet to achieve this, which we'll get onto in a second, but because we're going to do this magnetizing, I'm not going to attach all of these cables. Now, you get different types of cable depending on the weapons, and if you do that, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to stick the weapons on in the kind of pose that you might want. So I'm actually going to leave those off. When it comes to, you know, a bit more test fitting a bit later on, I may go for the cables, but to be honest, I never did that with the larger scale ones. I've done it with the smaller ones only. So the first magnet we're going to use, this is for the sort of the shoulder mount joint that's going to go into the weapon, so the bit that's the ball socket. Now, this one is a 3mm by 2mm magnet, and that is basically the size that will fit inside or replace the upper ball section of these, the sort of the double ball section. So 3 by 2. There we go. Look at that. I'm even indicating it with the use of fingers on screen as a reminder of the size. So what we're going to do is cut off the ball socket on one of these little sections here and replace it with that magnet. You can see there, I'm just eyeing it up for size. Now, these weapon systems, I think, were a little bit too shallow to drill those out for that particular size of magnet. So what I'm going to use inside the weapon is a disc magnet. And I'll show you that in a second. But first off, we must cut off this little nub that's on the weapon mount brackets here, these little double ball joints. So we're going to cut one of those off, and then we're going to replace that with a magnet. Now, these are really quite fiddly, so don't lose them, which I pinged one across my hobby room and spent 20 minutes trying to find it a little bit earlier on. And originally I was going to drill those balls out, but decided to cut them off instead and rebuild with green stuff. Now, these are the disc magnets I'm going to use, and they are just 1mm deep and 5mm wide. And they will fit kind of perfectly into the weapons, but you do need to drill them out just a little bit so that you create that little bit of flat depth, because they're built as a socket joint rather than a flat joint, which is what we're going to want for the magnet. So I'm just using a 5mm drill bit here by hand, just so I can turn out basically where the weapon sockets here turn up to form that socket joint. I'm just trying to flatten that out a little bit with a drill head. So that's all I'm doing here, is just in order for that flat magnet to recess a little bit in there, so that the arms don't become a little bit too elongated, and they actually match how the kit should be built, and then you won't notice that when they're all painted. So just a couple of turns of the drill bit, and we'll just do that across all of the weapons. So don't forget there are 8 of them. So just the final one here, and then we're good to go. So next up then, whilst we've drilled those out, we can just cut off the end of this ball socket. I'm just using a pair of clippers here. You could use a razor saw, but I found when I was trying to hold the other end to try and use the razor saw, it became a little bit painful. So I just resorted to clippers, and then just using the flat edge of a scalpel, just scrape away any excess so that we've got a nice flat connection point. Now, the next tricky bit is trying to get that magnet to glue on, because it's a very small surface area. As I said, they're only 3mm magnets, these ones. So a little bit of super glue, and I actually used a little bit of water, but if you've got an accelerant, I'd recommend that as well. I did manage to glue my fingers together several times, uh, as the magnet wouldn't take very well, and you can see the efforts here. But if you've got a little bit of patience, maybe some tweezers, but basically the magnet kept sticking to my thumb, as you can see here, and it was a little bit of a disaster. But eventually we got round to it, and just pinging these things all over the place. But we got it attached in the end, and then we just moved on to mixing up a little ball of green stuff. Now what we're going to do is just basically recreate around the edge of that magnet just the rest of that ball section, so that it looks like it's not a big step into the magnet when it comes to painting. So it's just a kind of a little bit of filler. You don't actually need very much of this stuff. I over mix a little bit too much here. We put a little bit off and then turn that into like a little sausage, and then we wrap that around the magnet and allow it to kind of cure for a little bit, so that we can then shape it a little bit better after it starts to lose its stickiness. So with the magnet now kind of dry and not going anywhere, this little sausage of green stuff will just press around the outside like so, and then just kind of roughly shape it at this stage. But because it's all kind of sticky and tacky and still very malleable, there's not a lot you can do about it at this stage. We just kind of need it to go off for about sort of 20-30 minutes and let it begin to cure a little bit. Now with that green stuff curing in the background, we can move on and just attach those disc magnets into these now drilled out weapons. So a little bit of super glue into the bottom pit of that, and then we want to make sure that we get the orientation right on the magnets. This is key to any magnetizing. So you've already put those magnets on those the two sort of weapon bracket arms there, and then we just want to make sure that these go the right way round. And these are, if you get this wrong when you've recessed these in, it's quite painful to extract them, as I found out. I'm terrible for getting magnetization wrong. No matter how many times I recheck it, I go and test it afterwards and it's the wrong way round. You notice that I'm using a brass rod to press that in. Brass isn't magnetic. And as you can see, a little cheat in the background. I've already done one of these already, and I was just testing it against ones that I've already done compared to the ones that are drying. But all we're going to do now is just put magnets into the rest of the weapons, as you can see here. And now at that point, the green stuff has begun to cure, and all I'm going to do is just shape that with a scalpel, cut any excess off, and then we end up with this once they're glued into place. And you can see the magnets all sticking out quite nicely, and then the weapon arms all in place. And that's pretty much it. That's the magnetizing guide, really. All we need to do is just show how that works. So we can just grab any one of these weapons and look at that. They just clip in as if by magic, or is that magnetism? One of the two. And they sit there and freely rotate and so on. And this is the reason why I probably won't end up going with the cable options. But you can see here, all of the weapons, all the orientation is the correct way round. And all I need to do then is just finish off the second one of these, and then that's the pair built. And with all the weapons ready to be attached by magnets, as we can see here, it's just a case of then trimming out the rest of the armour panels, and I'm going to be painting those entirely separately because they'll be a different colour. So then all the weapons and torsos and stuff will be metallic, but the weapons will be in Legio colours. So there we go then, guys. That is the two Warhounds for my Imperial collection. So these are going to be part of the Legio Astorum collection that's going to go alongside my Questorist Knights and my Warlord Titan. Now I don't own Reaver Titans yet. I think I may well add those, and potentially the Lancers as well. They do the those as well. I may get into that, I may not. Just depends how excited I am for the game. But at the moment I'm just enjoying the painting. So I hope you enjoyed this little guide on the build, the unbox, and more specifically, I guess, the magnetizing process, so that you can use all the different weapon options that come in the kit. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I shall catch you guys on the next video.